This lesson corresponds with Honors Chemistry Notes, Unit 9, Roman number 1, an introduction to chemical equations. When writing a chemical equation, the general equation is that you start with the reactants and you end with the products. In the middle, there is this arrow. It's called a yield sign, and it separates the reactant side from the product side. So again, starting materials are called reactants, ending materials are called products. The reactants and products involved in a chemical reaction are always substances. They may include single atoms or diatomic elements, both from the periodic table, or they may include compounds. So if you recall, we've talked about the diatomic elements before. They are the ones that can never occur in nature as single atoms. They start on number 7, nitrogen. They make a 7 on the periodic table, and there are 7 of them if you count hydrogen over here. So again, the diatomics start on 7, make a 7, and there are 7 of them if you include hydrogen. So when reading a chemical reaction, anything that's diatomic has to have a 2 along with its symbol, and any other element from the periodic table may be represented just by the element symbol because it is a single atom. Here I've just given you some examples. Al, C, K, Na, basically anything from the periodic table that's not one of your 7 diatomics. In addition to having just things off the periodic table, you can also have ionic compounds or covalent compounds. Again, this is review. Ionic compounds consist of a metal and a nonmetal, and when you write them, you must cross the charges. Calcium bromide, sodium acetate. Covalent compounds are only nonmetals. When you write those, you have to use the prefixes. That's carbon dioxide, trichlorine, pentaphosphide. There are also some symbols used in chemical equations. The plus symbol separates 2 reactants or 2 products. The S, or the down arrow, represents a solid. In general, we'll just use an S. An L represents a liquid. A G, or an up arrow, indicates gas. And again, we'll tend to just go with the G. AQ stands for aqueous solution. And anytime you hear aqua or aquatic, any of those, you think of water. An aqueous solution is just dissolved in water. This is done so that a solid substance can react with something else. The big arrow in the middle of the equation is called the yield sign. It separates the reactant side from the product side. And when something's written over the yield, that's known as a catalyst. Catalysts are used to speed up a chemical reaction.
Yes, just one important announcement before midday.
A catalyst might either be a substance or it could be something like heat. PT is off your periodic table, the element platinum. When a substance like platinum is written over the yield sign, that just means that that substance is the catalyst. When you put this sign, it's called a delta sign. Looks like a triangle, but it's a Greek symbol, delta. When you put that over the yield sign, that represents that heat is the catalyst. Let's look at an example. Write a skeleton equation for the following word equations. When solid calcium carbonate is heated, a solid calcium oxide and the gas carbon dioxide are produced. The first thing we're going to do is go through the equation or the sentence and highlight the substances. Calcium carbonate, calcium oxide, and carbon dioxide are the 3 substances in this sentence. Next, you should determine which are substances and which are products, reactants, and catalysts. So, products, remember, are ending materials. Reactants are beginning materials, and catalysts are just used to help speed up the reaction. Calcium carbonate is something we start with, so it's a reactant. Calcium oxide and carbon dioxide are produced, Therefore, they are products. You should have also caught that it says it's heated, so we're going to have to indicate the catalyst is heat in this equation. When writing your chemical equation, pay attention to the types of substances. So, as we write this, we're going to have one reactant. Over the yield sign, I've got the delta for heat, and then I'm going to have two products. The first reactant is an ionic compound. Remember, I said there's four types: atoms, diatomic elements, ionic compounds, covalent compounds. When it's ionic, you've got to cross your charges. If you look up calcium on the periodic table, it's got a positive 2 charge. Carbonate's polyatomic, CO3 with a negative 2. The charges are going to cancel each other out, so it's just going to be CaCO3. Going to the product side, calcium oxide. Calcium is plus 2, oxygen is minus 2. Another ionic compound, cross the charges, CaO. Lastly, carbon dioxide is a covalent compound, so we're going to use the prefix. Di means 2, so carbon dioxide is CO2. Here's our final skeleton equation. Whoops, not quite yet. So don't forget, we have to put S for solid for calcium oxide, and G for gas for carbon dioxide. So make sure you have the symbols, the catalysts, and then, if needed, solid, liquid, or gas. Okay, let's try another one. Highlight the substances. You might want to pause so you have a chance to do it for yourself. Sodium, water, hydrogen, sodium hydroxide. You might want to pause before looking at which are reactants and products. Sodium and water react. Hydrogen and sodium hydroxide are the products. Sodium is a single atom. Therefore, I'm just going to write it as Na. Water is covalent, but we know it by its common name, H2O. Hydrogen gas is diatomic. Remember, there's 7 of them. Hydrogen gas has to be written as H2. And since the word gas is in there, I'm going to go ahead and put my G to indicate that it is a gas. I didn't really have to write anything after sodium or water because it doesn't say that it's solid or liquid. I could write it from my knowledge, but I don't have to because it's not explicitly stated. Finally, sodium hydroxide is an ionic compound. Sodium is positive 1, hydroxide is minus 1, NaOH. Try the last example independently. Go ahead and pause and come back. You should have underlined sulfur, oxygen, and sulfur dioxide. Sulfur and oxygen are combining. Did you notice that it says ignited? That means that it's being heated up. That's a catalyst. And it says that it's going to form sulfur dioxide. There's my product. 2 reactants yield 1 product. Sulfur is a single atom, also a solid, so just the symbol S with solid. Oxygen is diatomic, O2, and it is a gas. My delta symbol shows that it's ignited. And my product, sulfur dioxide, is a covalent compound, so I'm going to use the prefix SO2, and it is a gas, so I put a G. Now that you've had some practice with looking at sentences and writing out the equations, let's go the opposite way. Now you have an equation and you have to write out the sentence. So let's start at the beginning. This is a solid, and what's the name of this ionic compound? Solid sodium hydrogen carbonate. Now I need to say something to indicate that I know that plus sign is there. I have several options. I could just use the word and. I could use the words reacts with. is combined with, or several other options, I'm going to go ahead and say reacts with. Do you remember what compounds that start with H's are? You should remember that those are acids, and since chloride is your anion, you're going to use a hydro beginning and an ic at the end. So that is hydrochloric acid, and the AQ tells us that it is aqueous. Now I'm at the yield sign. So I could use the words to yield, or I could say to produce, to form, or to make. This time I'm going to say to produce. And what are we producing? I have to name these things over here. Aqueous sodium chloride, liquid water. Water is almost always liquid, but since it says L, I'm going to go ahead and put it in. And carbon dioxide gas. We will practice more of this in tomorrow's lab. Please be prepared to know how to write reactants and products.